All right, part two about sex offenders and protective custody, right? So, my last video, I kind of described what protective custody was like, some of the people that are on protective custody, and we were talking about sex offenders, right? And so, now keep in mind, when I say sex offender, it doesn't necessarily mean 100% that it's crimes against children. Could be crimes against men, could be crimes against women. You know what I mean? And a lot of the times, sex offenders, they're looked down upon, right? Especially if they're child molesters. You hear other inmates and other prisons and shit call them chomos and shit, right? That I don't really hear that too much at TDC though. But that they're not all in protective custody, right? There's sex offenders walking around everywhere, especially guys that have raped a woman or something like that. It's not uncommon. Back there in Seg, there was lots of them. And so another little story I'm going to tell you about is sex offenders in AdSeg. There was an inmate who had this very identifiable, there was an inmate that had a tramp stamp, right? You know how women will have tramp stamps? Well, this guy had a tramp stamp across the top of his back. And it was like, I'm that bitch. We'll just say it said, I'm that bitch or something, right? And what they were doing, they were actually out there prostituting themselves out for noodles and soups and shit. And this individual got segged because he was prostituting himself out there for noodles and shit like that. But the problem was, what he was not divulging to other inmates, that he was actually HIV positive. And that's not really what the tattoo said, because I'm going to respect their rights and privacies and shit like that, because confidentiality is important still, right? So, yeah, they were prostituting themselves out for noodles, and a lot of these guys over here banging his punk, that's what they call him, a punk, were banging this guy, not knowing that he had HIV. All right, so the second story and he's not a sex offender, he's just doing sex acts in prison. And in Texas, there's no such thing as consensual sex. So that's no matter if they're boyfriends or whatever, or if it's rape, it's never consensual in prison, right? And so, but another thing, as far as actual sex offender goes, there was this sex offender who was raising hell down there in Seg, where I worked, and one of the bosses had said, guess what? He says he don't eat when it comes chow time. And, so I run chow, I pick up all the trays, and then I go to his house, and I open up his door, and I slide his food in there, right? And the other boss, this is a pod where there's 3 people down there. He comes out and says, I told you not to feed that guy. And he started charging me up in front of him, right? And I'm friends with this guy today. But at that time, he said, he's a sex offender. And the bosses, not the bosses, but the inmates in the section were like, he's a sex offender. Yeah, fuck him. He don't need to eat or whatever. And I stepped back. And I told, first of all, I told that other boss, I said, I'm running chow right now. And then second, I stepped back where I could see all the guys in their window, because they were all wondering what was going on. And I said, if I stop feeding sex offenders, I got to stop feeding half of you right now. You know what I'm saying? And you know what they did? They went and sat down on their bunk, because they know that's fucking true. Because whether you like it or not, there's a lot of fucking sex offenders in TDCJ. So I fed the guy, because I truly don't believe in making their time any harder than what it has to be. And I'm not going to sit here and not feed a fucking person, even though there's something called the all red diet. Like, if you heard of boss, it's if you poke out my buddy's eye, well, you might be hungry for a while. But like, in general, I don't go fucking off people for no reason at all. You know what I'm saying? And there wasn't a reason for me. You were just giving somebody a hard time. And if I was in his situation in that cell, I may have given the boss a hard time. It sucks back there. But yeah, so that's kind of what it looks like, yo. There's lots of sex offenders in TDC. Some are looked down a lot harshly and poorly than others, especially if it's crimes against children. If you rape and kill your old lady or something, you might still get accepted. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I'll holler at y'all. I'll think of something else to talk about and make another one here while I'm waiting on my wife at Target. You know what I'm saying? I'll holler at y'all. Be easy.